the worst humanitarian crisis ever in the Western Hemisphere.
Over 4 million refugees.
90% of the population living below the poverty line.
Food and medicine shortages.
Extreme inflation.
This is the Venezuelan Crisis.
Welcome to this What the Faux documentary podcast with Nick and Amy. Now, this one is about the Venezuelan crisis and the effect it's been having on its neighbouring country, Colombia.
Yeah, now, this year we've been lucky enough to travel almost all of South America. And this is the big topic. It's the big thing that's going on here right now. And I think every country we've been to, we have seen Venezuelan refugees, haven't we? Absolutely.
Whether that's them being on the street with their suitcases, or if they're working in a restaurant or a bar or a barber's, so many different skills and areas of life that we've seen them.
Yeah, that's so true. It's such a good point. So that's why we wanted to, we wanted to do something about it. We couldn't ignore it. We wanted to make some sort of podcast about it, telling the story and meeting people that are affected by it. So that is what this podcast is all about.
Now, we wanted to focus on the side coming from Colombia, because you can look into any news outlet and they will tell you what's happening in Venezuela and give you quite a real account of what's happening. So we didn't want to saturate that side of the media anymore. We wanted to tell you what it's like for their neighbouring country, Colombia, because they've taken in a lot of Venezuelans due to their history, which we'll tell you about in this podcast.
So in this podcast, you will hear from Colombians in Medellin.
The thing is, we need to control the situation with them, like to legalize the situation with them, because otherwise it's going to get out of control.
We head to the front line, Colombia's border town of Cúcuta.
De colombianos que se fueron a Venezuela, que retornaron a Colombia.
We speak to Venezuelans making a new life in Colombia.
It's not a surprise that it's hard for people that doesn't have a degree can find a job easily.
And we hear direct from Caracas, the Venezuelan capital.
Having a normal life from 99% of the country, it's not possible at all.
So join us as we learn about how the situation happened and hear from the people affected by it.
Now, first we need to understand how once Latin America's richest country has declined into chaos.
My name is Pilar Marrero. I'm Venezuelan, was born and raised and studied in Venezuela. I moved to the United States in the late 80s, but all my family is still there. My parents remain there, my brothers and sisters, my cousins. My parents are now deceased, and many of my cousins and nephews and nieces have left the country because there's really no future there.
Pilar, a journalist and podcaster, is going to explain what went so wrong.
We're talking about 20 years of policy, 20 years of two governments, the government of Hugo Chavez and the government of Nicolás Maduro, starting in 2013 when Hugo Chavez died. He took over after that. So it's the gravest economic collapse any country has ever had outside of a war or a natural disaster. It's a really dire situation. I mean, dire is not enough of an adjective to really explain it. But I think a large part of the explanation for this collapse has to do with what happened with the oil industry. So the country is a petrostate, meaning all of its economy is based on oil, like 95% of the economy. And this is before Chavez. This was true before Chavez. This was true after Chavez. This is still true today. This is one of the reasons, or the foundation of why it's doing so badly. The country has the largest proven reserves of oil in the world. It's somewhat justified to think that you can base all of your economy on something like that. But everyone also knows that the price of oil goes up and down. And there are times when everything's up and there are times when it goes down. And that when it's up, you should be doing certain things like saving for a later day, like fixing the infrastructure, keeping up the infrastructure of the oil industry, et cetera, et cetera. Hugo Chavez takes in 1999 when oil was very low, but then in 2003 it shot up to its highest point, over $100 a barrel. So he says, okay, I'm going to use this money to implement all the programs that I want to implement, to deepen the socialist revolution, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens is that he starts spending like crazy. And instead of saving something and putting some aside, he actually starts going into debt. At the same time, he wants to deepen the socialist revolution, so he starts taking over private enterprises, taking over private corporations. Essentially, he wanted the state to own all the means of production, which is what socialism is, right? In its purest form. So what happens is that the production by the private enterprise, by private companies, starts going down, starts disappearing, companies start leaving. And so instead of using those companies and growing those companies, many of those companies go under. Or those companies are taken over by political appointees, like eventually happened with the oil industry. And of course, that brings in a whole host of problems. It was essentially the oil industry was deprofessionalized. So there was a strike. The leaders of PDVSA, which is the oil industry, went on strike. Many of them were in the opposition. They were against the policies that were being implemented, et cetera, et cetera. And what Chavez does is he fires 20,000 people from PDVSA. So at this point, he starts putting all these political appointees and people from his party in charge. And what happens is there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of lack of investment. There's all this disarray going on. When the oil starts going down, which happened a little bit before he died, and then after he died, oil prices really started to go down. Already, the economy of Venezuela was very weak. Production had fallen. And in fact, I think Venezuela right now produces less oil than it produced 50 years ago. So for a country that fully depends on oil, if your oil production falls 4 or 5 times to something that's not sustainable, that's not producing the dollars you need to buy imports, because Venezuela produces nothing else. So they have to buy everything from the outside, and you need dollars for that, right? So all of it is compounded. And it creates all of these crises when the prices go down, and instead of spending less, you keep spending, like you still have the money, and getting more and more into debt. So Maduro comes in, and he goes into debt with China. He goes into debt with Russia. So he keeps spending to try to keep the social programs, try to keep his supporters happy, but it's impossible because he just simply doesn't have the money. That's a huge part of it. Of course, in 2017, the United States imposes financial sanctions, and then this year it imposed oil sanctions, which of course is going to deepen whatever problems Venezuela has. However, the deep economic recession that Venezuela was in, the problem with the collapse of the oil industry was already a problem, even before 2017. So this is the summary. Of course, now you have to go and explain, and go to what happened with the electricity grid, what happened with, all the public sector services, is that they also collapsed because they were not being kept up. They were not being maintained. There was no investment in them. So it's a really sad situation, but the reality is that all of this was preventable, all of it.
We're in Colombia, Venezuela's neighbour and the country that has taken in the most Venezuelan refugees, over 1 million.
Here is the Colombian president, Iván Duque, being interviewed by the Financial Times in mid-2019. He was asked if he wants to sit down with the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro and discuss a solution about the Venezuelan refugee situation.
Maduro is a dictator. And let me begin by saying something. Most of the countries in Latin America did not recognize the results of the last election, where he manipulated all the power to remain in his seat. So when we look at that, What is our moral duty? The only viable solution to the most horrendous migration crisis in America and Latin America's recent history, where we as Colombians have received more than 1.3 million Venezuelan brothers, begins with Maduro stepping out of power.
He's obviously not a fan of Maduro, but listen again to how he describes the Venezuelan people.
Venezuelan brothers.
Now, to understand why he's referring to them as brothers, you need to look back at the two countries' history. From 1819 to 1830, Colombia and Venezuela, along with Panama and Ecuador, were part of the same country, Gran Colombia. If this wasn't a strong enough bond, historically Colombians have actually fled to Venezuela to escape their own internal conflicts. Maybe Colombians feel like they owe it to themselves and their neighbours to help them out. That's one of the things that we're here to find out.
We begin our journey in Medellin. Once the world's most dangerous city and the setting of drug wars, this place, as well as the whole of Colombia, has come a long way. Tourists only started coming to Colombia in numbers in 2014.
Mi nombre es Daniel Fernando Ríos. Mi empresa se llama Guía Tour C13, Comuna 13.
That's Daniel, who provides tours around Comuna 13. A few years ago, Comuna 13 was considered the most dangerous area in Medellin. Remember, the most dangerous city in the world. Tourists didn't dare set foot here, and locals were too ashamed to admit they lived in the favela, or barrios, that clings to a mountain in western Medellin.
Now, it's a very different story. Comuna 13 has undergone a complete transformation. The area is no longer known for gang violence, police raids, cartels, and illegal trafficking. These days, Comuna 13 is known for graffiti, street art performances, and walk-in tours.
Being a Medellin resident, we wanted to ask Daniel if Colombians here want to help Venezuelans.
Sí, sí, les ayudamos mucho a los venezolanos, incluso por acá.
Yes, we do help them a lot. People come to live here, and we open our doors to them so they can live with us. It's the same as we would do for you or anyone else.
Igual a ustedes, igual a todos.
Since the crisis in Venezuela, has there been a negative impact here in Colombia?
Sí, económico y es negativo. Pasa de que nosotros los apoyamos, como te digo.
Yes, there has been a negative economic impact. We support them, as I was explaining to you, because they're human beings, but everything has its consequences. They come here and offer their labor very cheap, and for that reason, that has complicated the job market for my fellow Colombians. And yes, that has made things tough, but we would not reject them for that reason.
Vienen siendo colombianos. Sí, ha sido un poquito difícil, pero no por eso los rechazamos.
Now, we just want to pause for a second to say a massive thank you to long-term listener Carlos Fabrega. We want to say thank you so much because he actually translated and read out that last interview. So thank you for supporting the show and helping us out.
Thank you, Carlos.
Now, during our time in Medellin, we also were able to talk to Mauricio and Meli, a young engaged couple living and working in the city. We wanted to know if they shared Daniel's views.
Definitely we should help them, and the thing is we need to control the situation with them, like to legalize the situation with them, because otherwise it's gonna get out of control. Yeah, we usually help them when we find people in the streets from Venezuela, they're trying to sell candies or selling something.
But it's really sad because they are professionals, or they leave their families, their kids, and in here it's not easy for them. They are professionals, they're
doctors, engineers, and here they're just waiters.
And you've met those people, haven't you?
Sure.
You were in a restaurant and you were being waited by a doctor.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
It was weird because he could speak like English, Portuguese, Spanish, and he was a doctor in Venezuela, and then he was here as a waiter and earning like nothing of money. So it was sad, but he was happy because he could help the family with that little money, but sad.
They're trying to survive.
Yeah.
We think we have or we should help them, because in the past, when in Colombia the situation, it was not that hard, but it was difficult for us, and a lot of Colombians go to Venezuela to have a better life.
Yeah.
So now they are coming and we have to help them. But it's been too much Venezuelans on the streets, and it makes the city looks like there are a lot of homeless. So looks like insecurity or unsafe, and tourists or local people think it's hard to live with that situation.
We asked, apart from homeless people making the streets appear unsafe, are there any other negative impacts on Colombia?
Yes, because of the change of the money. So the money that they earn in here helps a lot to people from in Venezuela who lives there.
So they earn the money here and they send it home.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that helps a lot. So in here they give their job for less money than a Colombian do. So it's hard for Colombians to get a job, because obviously for us we need more money to survive and they need less. In restaurants, in stores, in a lot of places, it's full of Venezuelans because it's cheaper for the employer.
And they are illegal. A lot of them are illegal.
A lot of them.
So that's, I think that's the main problem.
As Mauricio said, many of the Venezuelans are illegal. We were told that one of the main reasons for this was because the Venezuelan government actually stopped producing passports a few years ago. This has meant that many desperate Venezuelans have had no choice but to leave without papers. Mauricio and Meli want to help these people and Colombia by legalising these refugees so they can get proper jobs and they can pay Colombian taxes.
At this stage, we thought we had to get closer to the crisis. It's nice that people here in Medellin want to help, but some might say that they're slightly removed from it all. Somewhere that is not removed and is smack bang in the middle of the crisis is Cúcuta, a Colombian city on the border with Venezuela. Against the advice of some people, we boarded a plane from Medellin, very anxious but very curious about what we'd find there. And what we found there really surprised us.
A normal, nice town. People were enjoying their lives, laughing and dancing, only a matter of meters away from the worst humanitarian crisis ever in the Americas. For our time in Cúcuta, we were staying with a couple, Danielle, a Colombian, and Gustavo, who is Venezuelan. They agreed to show us around their city and to take us to the border tomorrow, but for today, they invited us on a night out.
So the next morning, after what was a really good night out, we had a great time, there was great music, and just the whole time we were in Cúcuta, it wasn't this big scary place we thought it was going to be. It was a normal, nice town, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was actually really impressed with it. So, after our nice night out with Danielle and Gustavo, they drove us to the border. It's actually a bridge that connects the two countries over the river Táchira. And when we got there, again, it wasn't this big scary place we thought it was going to be, the border, was it?
No, actually our two hosts said to us that they don't like going to the border. It makes them slightly nervous. So that in turn made us a bit more anxious.
Yeah.
But when we arrived, everybody was just going along with their own normal lives. They were walking around, they were selling. It was hectic South America, as the other countries are.
I completely agree. It wasn't different to many other places in South America that we've been to.
Yeah, so it seemed pretty peaceful, but there were plenty of people making the daily cross to buy supplies or to see friends and family. But this border hasn't always been peaceful. In February, the Venezuelan government closed this border and many others in retaliation as their oppositions tried to deliver food and medical aid supplies into the country. Most of this aid was coming from the USA, and Maduro rejected it, saying it was an infringement on Venezuela's sovereignty. 4 months later, and the border has reopened, and long lines and thousands of Venezuelans poured into Cúcuta.
We were keen to ask Daniel how his city has changed since the Venezuelan crisis.
Sí ha cambiado y no a la vez, o sea, es algo muy complejo.
Well, I think that it has changed, but it also hasn't at the same time. The quality of life in Venezuela has deteriorated a lot, but before the crisis, Venezuelans used to come and spend their money here in Colombia. Cucuta used to be like a small Miami. People would come here with a lot of money. They would spend a weekend here, they would buy Christmas gifts, buy clothes, groceries. They would stay here and support the tourism. They would go out to eat, to have fun. And obviously for us it was not a problem. We benefited from it greatly because the Venezuelans will come and leave their money here. Right now, they still do, but the reason is completely different. They come to buy and live here, but it stems from the crisis in Venezuela because right now they can't get goods or medication. For example, the price is very too much. Let's say that a bag of sugar cost 3,000 Colombian pesos yesterday, then today it costs 6,000 or 7,000 and doubles. One may say it's normal for prices to go up, but over there in Venezuela, prices are going up about 10 times in a year. Basically, every month the prices are going up, so that deteriorates the quality of life over there. And the other thing is that many businesses are closing in Venezuela or going bankrupt. Businesses need quality and consistent electrical power, and it has been deteriorating in Venezuela. We have seen in the news that there has been power outages for 2 or 3 days at a time. 3 or 4 years ago, we will see power outages for 1, 2, 3 hours a day, and that started to hurt businesses. Many companies that were located in Venezuela or the border, they moved to Cucuta. Also, a lot of people have preferred to come to Colombia. Venezuelans are very skilled and qualified manual laborers, so this has caused the work dynamics in the cities to change. They have lowered the cost for manual labor. If you go to a restaurant, you will see the waiter is Venezuelan, the chef is Venezuelan. If you go to a barber shop, a large percent of are Venezuelans. In one way, it's good to enrich the culture and the way we do things. As a country, we are not prepared to receive this amount of immigrants. It's been difficult for my city. However, looking at it from a positive side, it's made the people here stop depending so much on Venezuela. For example, in the last few years, the fare of Cucuta has returned. Large commercial centers have been built and hotels are popping up all over the metropolitan area. There are 3 large hotel chains in Cucuta. So I feel in one way or another, it has incentivized the city to base the economy around Cucuta.
Eso ha hecho que el mismo cucuteño empiece a incentivar la economía dentro del mismo cucuteño.
We're interested to know if these two groups of people living together, Venezuelans and Colombians, does that cause many problems? Are there many conflicts?
Sí, de igual manera como decía hace un momento y pues también siempre he pensado...
Yes, I guess at times, but I've also always thought that we have been a country that has always immigrated to other countries because of the internal conflicts Colombia had for many years. This conflict lasted almost 60 years and resulted in Colombians going to Ecuador or Venezuela for a better life. There are many Colombians that went to Venezuela and they now have returned. They think that close to 4 million Venezuelans have crossed through the border to Colombia. It's estimated that 1 million Venezuelans are now living here in Colombia. That has displayed the labor force from one business to another. Many people have complained about this. Another thing Colombians complain about is this has put pressure on the healthcare system. The healthcare system in Colombia is vulnerable. I think it's good that many people are in favor or helping our Venezuelans brother because that's what we are, brothers. However, our health and education departments have suffered. In addition, we also have defects within our system. We do not have good ways to control or administer tax money of the Colombian people. Many people have benefited or have basically robbed this tax money, which doesn't help Colombians or Venezuelans. So, unfortunately, political campaigns trying to get into power, they will use this conflict with Venezuela to their advantage. Finally, I must say that Colombian people are very eager to help. We have helped where we can, and perhaps there is no more we can do, but we have tried to do what we can.
Y el colombiano ha tratado de ayudar hasta donde más ha podido. De pronto podemos hacer más, pero hemos tratado de hacer hasta donde más se ha podido.
And another brief pause to say a massive thanks to Karim there for reading out that last interview. And again, it was translated by Carlos.
During our time in Cúcuta, we were keen to hear Gustavo's story. He came to Colombia 4 years ago and fortunately found a job and a comfortable, happy life. But for many Venezuelans, this isn't the case.
Most of the people that came 4 years ago or 3 years ago was prepared people, like graduate people, people that have a PhD, doctors, teachers, engineers. So it's not a surprise that it's hard for people that doesn't have a degree can find a job easily. But the thing with Cúcuta is that Cúcuta is always has been very open with the farmers because we are in the border, and in the border you always meet people from the whole world. It's not only Venezuelan. We have Peruvians here, we have Ecuadorians, and other people that came from the other countries where they're born. And they came here. The city opens their arms because they see an opportunity for work or for make productivity for the city. And it's really hard, the situation in Venezuela, because there's a lot of Venezuelans. We also don't know how many Venezuelans are because there are a lot. It's like 20,000 persons that cross the border per day. And it's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. And the city is not prepared for that. So that maybe causes bad feelings from the Cucuteños.
His mum still lives in Venezuela, but close to the border. Gustavo explains that she actually isn't affected too badly because the border has its own economy. Some companies close to the Venezuelan border actually even pay their staff in Colombian pesos.
She works as a teacher in a primary school. Gustavo explains one of the reasons why she wants to stay in Venezuela.
She helps also their students because there are some cases that one child didn't eat from 3 days. And she makes things and help her and talk with her friends and get some groceries or food or something. She's trying to help them. So I think that's the way why she didn't came here, because she is thinking that maybe she is supporting something from people that doesn't have at all anything.
Okay, now it's time to go into Venezuela. Not us physically, but we're going to hear from someone living in the capital, Caracas.
My name is Miguel Arturo. I'm from Caracas. I study psychology.
Miguel lives in the city and has invited travellers on the couchsurfing app to stay with him. He joined us on Skype to tell us if it's possible to have a normal life in Caracas right now.
Well, the thing in Venezuela, it's that I think it's hard for some people to understand crisis because there are always places where rich people live and not the same things happen there. So Venezuela is not different in that way. So there are places where you live and like all of them are private properties and they have security guard and they have all tanks in their house. Some of them has electricity plants that work with gasoline, which is really cheap. So yeah, that's the thing. Having a normal life from 99% of the country, it's not possible at all because you depend on public services like water and electricity and gas. It's not constant working. I mean, the electricity can be gone at any time during the day. Some places have already when every day the same time it's off. Some places which the water more troubles. In Caracas it's usually better than in the rest of the country. So yeah, it's not possible at all. Medicine is the hardest thing to find here. So yeah, it's almost impossible. There is actually in the recent years here in Venezuela, we have started to see kind of zombies in the city. People that their job does not pay enough to pay the public transport, so you don't know what to do. So you cannot go to the work, but you can stay at home, so it's not much to do. So you just walk around trying to find something to buy or resell, and yeah, that's it. It's really hard to find employee here because most of the people live in places where they don't have access to public transport, because 80% of public transport has the units, like the bus. Once it gets broke, it's not fixed, so it's stay just broken.
The people who can't find a job that pays enough money to make it worth going to work, how do they survive? Like you said, maybe finding things to sell, or do they rely on friends and family who are outside the country sending money back?
Things change here every day, so in the recent years, that's what has been happening. Like, many people live from the money that people abroad send. There is not a legal way to send money here, so you have always to do it illegally. But other people they have their houses because they bought it years ago, so they only need to find food. If they get sick, they mostly die. And when you ask someone for a diet, for their daily diet, it's really like yuca, which is like potato but cheaper, mango, which is on the trees in Caracas, plantain. They don't eat meat or beans that has the protein, so a lot of problem with that. So, and the people are really, really starving, like really skinny. Every day, a lot of people go to leave Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, but at the same time, it's get harder to find a job there. So we see more people going, but then I don't know how much cash is flowing into Venezuela.
Do you personally have friends and family that have moved out of the country?
Yes. My brother is in Spain, my prima.
Your cousin?
Yeah, some family in Chile, in US, almost everywhere.
You as a local person, is it safe just to walk around Caracas, like to walk around the streets?
It has get safer, Caracas and Venezuela. I know you see the news, and from people who live abroad, they see the news in Venezuela all together with some other news, and they actually haven't been here, so it's like, well, I heard it wasn't food. Now it's a lot of food here, but people can afford it. So when they change the stuff, I don't think if people understand. So Venezuela used to be really unsafe. Now it's safer. But the reason why it's because the government has implemented some, I think it's called hardline policies. There's police getting into the ghettos, favelas, I don't know how to say, barrios, to kill every young male around my age or younger who could be related to crime. They dress like civilians and they get into the ghettos. So they check the people, they take photos, and in the middle of the night, they go in and kill them all.
How about you? Do you have hope for the future? Like, what do you think will happen in the next few years, or what do you hope will happen in the next few years?
I don't see a peaceful way to this to end. Hope, maybe I feel, I see the city, I walk around and I say, okay, I'm gonna get home here, I'm gonna have my family here, I'm gonna buy a house. I love the weather here is beautiful, I don't want to change it. But when I think rationally, I know, I'm actually looking to go to study my master in other places. No, I cannot think in a solution or a different way.
We were keen to get some advice for tourists if they insist on going to Venezuela during the crisis.
Well, you can get into Venezuela, it will be hard to your entry stamp because they will want you to pay for that. And then the hardest thing is crossing through the country. There is a lot of police stops and it's in the middle of nowhere, so they ask for money. And 100% sure they will ask you for money. And they can actually keep you there for no reason and make you working for them like a slavery. It happens every time. When you go through Venezuela, you see police stops that has civilians cleaning and do their job free because it's like a slavery. They kidnap you basically. But I have lost people and they have survived because they say, man, I don't have money at all. They look like hippies or even worse, they look like homeless. And it's like, dude, I don't have money at all. I only take photos with my phone, and I won't give you my phone because all my trip is in this phone. So I don't know what you're gonna do, but I won't do that. And I know it's hard. You need to be really, really strong because your embassy might not be here, your diplomatics. So you cannot go to, okay, I'm German, we'll go to the embassy and say, hey, this happened to me. Could you help me? No, there's no diplomatic relations. So it's like getting lost in North Korea. I mean, it's but it's possible because people have done it. I always say, hey, come here, but don't bring any kind of expensive things and some dollars into your underwear, and it's enough. Some clothes, old clothes, and you will survive. I have received some requests from Couchsurfing. Many people ask me, a lot of people ask me in Couchsurfing, can I go? I always answer the same, go, dress like a homeless, behave like a homeless. But it's a pity because girls have to be more careful, I think. This is not a country where, I never heard about a rape or something like that, but it's like maybe you don't have money, but you are pretty and they are old men and there's no idea of feminism here. No way, man. There's not a thing like that. Things change here every month. So you might find people that live, 1 year in Colombia or wherever, and they might tell you no, Venezuela is too dangerous. But things have changed here every day. With Couchsurfers, you think I can go in 3 months to Venezuela? I can't tell you. I don't know. Maybe 3 months ago, things were completely different. Now, they change every time. So it's hard to say. So when you understand in Venezuela, it's always about following the news and reading papers. There are a lot of papers. Universities still publish good papers about it. So that's what people who are interested in understanding Venezuela should do. Read papers, follow the news, trying to ask locals who just leave the country or still living there because it's changing every day.
If people are listening now, in England or in America, anywhere, and they think, I want to help, but what can I do? Is there anything people can do to help?
What they can do 100%, it's helping Venezuelans who are living now in their country.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And understand these people have had a really bad time. So in some countries, Venezuelan people do bad stuff, so they start thinking all Venezuelans are the same. The people that go to live abroad, they really want to change. They really want to do the things right. So, the most helpful thing, you can find a Venezuelan community and trying to help them to find a job, teaching their language, showing them helpful tips, give them some tools to live in their country,
Sad, depressing, but fascinating interview there with Miguel. So we do really appreciate that. It was really interesting to hear from inside Venezuela. We hope that this podcast has opened your eyes to the situation. And like Miguel said, maybe it will change your behavior in future towards Venezuelans next time you see one.
Yeah, and of course some have committed crimes and done bad things, just like any other nationality on this planet. But these people are desperate and they're going through something that can happen to any country, my country and your country. Mismanagement by the government and the general public are not at fault here.